Action. Great, go.
Okay. I'll start with number 2. What rhetorical choices does Peter use in this text with minor arguments for his main message? I think he used, or I personally believe he used pathos throughout his article to support that Edward used I feel like he was in his paintings, you could tell, you get like a vibe that he's very lonely or depressed or isolated. And I feel like when he
So like when you were saying like how the isolation, like he lived in one apartment for like half a century, so like his lack of movement kind of like is portrayed in his paintings. So like when he does like portraits of like these buildings with like no entry or no exit, I feel like that kind of coincides with his like staying in and being in one place. Plus he like kind of painted around the same type of areas. Like he was in New England, so he painted like New England like coastlines and things like that because that's what he was used to. And like even going on into his wife, like they said they were like two opposites. Like she kind of kept him not in that dark mode, you could say.
I like that he was like connecting the pandemic and like how he felt like to his paintings and like how he felt and like his emotions throughout like his experience like with his life and like the pandemic was like reflected onto his paintings. And yeah, we can see that he can properly express his feelings. Yep. Now we're number 2. Yes.
Let's see, and part of in the text it says Hopper often produces the unease even in unpeopled landscapes and views of buildings as if nature and habitation defensively exposed in disarray, mundanity, and squalor. And most of those art pieces end up being like that. They'll have like 1 or 2 people in them, and then it'll just be a background and foreground. And in a good amount of them, it'll have like a much darker colored background that like contrasts the foreground a lot to express, and then it'll have like a person next to it like this.
I found it interesting how he was very meticulous when it came to pointing out his paintings, kind of similar to how Alfred Hitchcock pointed out movies. He was much more careful with his paintings than the average artist, I guess.
Yeah, like when his life really is portrayed in his paintings. Like you were talking about the Hitchcock guy. They were friends. Like he really admired his work, so when he sees things like that, he tries to portray them in his paintings. So like he loves poetry and he like really loves to read and read and read, so that meticulous nature kind of falls into that, where he comes from and what he's known. So I feel like really his art itself is just him personified.
I agree. Like he was very thoughtful and really like sketched out every single detail in all of his paintings. Like particular body parts, and like I feel like
Yeah. For number 3, I'm feeling like the overall message was mainly, I could kind of see that his message could possibly be like showing you how to express your feelings, and like it doesn't always have to be like with words, like it can be through like paintings and like just like yeah, expressing feelings and painting. Yep.
I feel like it was more about the actual like aloneness of the paintings, because Peter writes it during the pandemic, so like headlines are like all about being in quarantine and like being alone. So that aspect of being alone in the paintings, I feel like reflects the human condition at the time and now. So I feel like there's a heavy relation between the past and the present in the moment. So I feel like that was the overarching message, like trying to connect past paintings to things that happen in the present time.
I also found it interesting that he was very distant to everybody around him, including his wife. It even said he once joked that talking with him was like dropping a rock down a well and waiting to hear it hit in vain. So yeah, I guess he was a very lonely, kind of distant person.
Going back to number 2, I feel like he also uses a little bit of ethos in it, talking about how his mental state and his emotions related back to the paintings that he drew, and how his like environment influenced it. And yeah.
For number 1, I feel like the accidents was going back to what you were saying with COVID and quarantine. As we got into quarantine, I feel like a lot of people felt alone and isolated, obviously. And he wrote this article in 2020, like June. So just a couple months after quarantine started. And so I feel like he was trying to like comfort everyone, saying like they're not alone, basically.
Yeah. Like basically expressing that this feeling of aloneness really brings people together, though that's like ironic. Like everyone is feeling the same way in that moment, but they feel so separated and isolated just because the physical situation, but in the mental aspect, they're like all together in one mind space. So I feel like he's really trying to connect on that level. Like it says in like the first thing, pandemic or not, the artist's masterly paintings explore conditions of aloneness as proof of belonging. Like that feeling of aloneness really isn't a separating aspect, it's more of a conjoining one when you put like the present times.
All right, Brian, what was, you had Solomon last year for, what was it, World Lit,
Yeah.
all right? What was that like, doing Zoom?
It was something. It was something. It, like the feeling of not being in the classroom, not having like the energies bounce off each other. It was like really different than like your normal in classroom setting. So like it was really, some of that like creativity kind of fizzles out a little bit, and you become just more mundane and focusing on completing tasks and expressing.
Yeah, I feel the same way, 100%. That's a very valid sense.
Better to be back? Psychologically? Psychologically.
Psychologically, yes.
That's what, yeah.
Yeah. I do prefer sleeping, but you gotta do school. So it's better to be in person, because then I actually do stuff. Edward's a pretty cool guy, not gonna lie. He's really good at painting. That's all.
Have you since seen that painting? The cafe paint, the Nighthawks?
I'd seen it before. I just didn't know it was from him.
Yeah.
Like that. I feel like I've literally seen it like spoofed a lot of times,
Yeah.
like cartoons and things like that. So
You're gonna
it
see
was
like
kind of
everywhere.
interesting to see who it actually came from. And I feel like it's weird that he like doesn't involve doors in his painting really. Like you can't discern where people like enter or exit from. Because I feel like he's trying to encase this whole like trapped mindset, which is like kind of weird because America is all about like being the United States, yet he's symbolizing things that are separated. So that was something.
Whoa, I'm hearing sophistication coming out of that essay on Friday, right there, right there. Right.
I actually do see a door.
Are
Is that
we
a door?
united as a people?
Do we think it's a door? No. No, it's not a door. It kind of look maybe like a closet type thing. Like a pantry, like storage closet.
Because there's no doors leading outside.
Oh, you're right. But this kind of looks like it's already outside. It looks like that's like just straight from the road.
Give them a hand!